Meeting with Waterways Ireland and the Lochs Agency, and I'd like them to welcome the following main presentations with all of you to the meeting here today. Don Livingston, Chief Executive of Waterways Ireland, and Sharon McMahon, Designated Lochs Agency, and your colleagues. In a moment I'll invite you to give your opening statement, and this will be followed by questions from the committee. But first there are some required notices. Notice 3, mobile phones. Before we begin, can I remind members, guests and those in the public gallery to ensure that their mobile phones, tablets, etc. are switched off completely for the duration of the meeting, as they cause interference even on silent mode with the recording equipment in the committee rooms. The next is notice re privilege. Also, I must remind members of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person or a body outside the Houses, or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. By virtue of Section 7D and subsection 2L of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to the Joint Committee. If they are directed by the chairperson to cease giving evidence on a particular matter and continue to do so, they are entitled thereafter only to qualified privilege in respect of their evidence. They are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and they are asked to respect the parliamentary practice that, where possible, they should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. I would now like to invite you to make your opening statement, and then we'll take questions from the floor. So you're very, very welcome. So Don, I think you're opening up first. Okay. You're very welcome.
Thank you for having the opportunity to come before you. Waterways Ireland is the largest of the North-South bodies. We look after 1,000 kilometres of navigation, probably one of the country's largest outdoor recreational assets. Our statutory function is to manage, maintain, develop and promote those. And on the slide below, you can see the spread of what we're looking after. We look after 2 major lake systems, the Shannon and the Erne navigation. There are 420 kilometres of canal, 360 kilometres that is watered, the Royal and the Grand Canal coming from the centre of Dublin right across to reach the Shannon, and the Barrow navigation which runs down the east coast, right up to the Lower Bann up on the north coast. In terms of our goal, what are we about? Our goal as an all-island body is to deliver world-class waterway corridors, to really capitalise on these unique natural assets, to leave them in better shape than we get them for the next generation, and to use them to create jobs and support businesses, while sustaining their unique built and natural heritage. There are challenges along the way, and I've set out some of those. Like all public bodies, we've declining resources. We've seen changes in the weather pattern. We've had 2 1-in-100-year storms within 3 years of each other. We've seen extreme flooding in the winters on very short periods, and we've seen a shortage of water this summer. Invasive species are another challenge for us. They're coming at us quicker than we can almost identify and map them. Last year we disinfected boats coming back into the Shannon to keep out crayfish plague. We do look after almost £1 billion worth of ageing and historic infrastructure. It's all over 200 years old, so we're looking after antiques, and with all the care and the cost that involves. We need to modernise our bylaws, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. And we have issues around water quality and supply. The water supply for the Royal Canal is currently being used for drinking water, and we're working with Dublin City Council and Irish Water to see that when the Midlands and Dublin water supply is restored, we get back the original water supply for the Royal Canal. And we have some pollution issues. And again, we work in highly designated lands. All of our waterways are SCAs or proposed NHAs, with the challenge that brings to look after them. How have we responded to these challenges? Well, originally when Waterways Ireland was formed, it did things like it redeveloped and reopened the Royal Canal, and now we use our capital funding to repair critical condition infrastructure. And you can see in the presentation some of the things we're doing. Waterways by their nature are expensive. The second slide shows the replacement gates taking place in Rooskey. That's on your Shannon navigation. You've got 5 major locks. They cost in the region of 800,000 to replace. We're using a combination of our own in-house labour, and we've started to make lock gates again in Tullamore. But it's a once-in-75-year job. Across the page again, we have our own core of skilled workforce, and you can see how we can respond to emergency failures. For example, here we're fixing an embankment. As well as if you have reduced resources, we've done things to reduce costs. So we have recognised that for some of our posts they should be seasonal, and we've brought that in. We've reduced our fixed overheads by 50%. We've reduced our management team, and we've used technology to try and save costs. And again, these are some of the examples. And we've tried to match when we employ people to when there is the greatest need for the service through a lockkeepers agreement. We've also looked at how we can earn income, and one of our goals is to try and create a sustainable, significant income for each waterway. We've also looked to commercially use the land assets belonging to particularly the canal network and create income through that. And we've used third-party funding to be able to continue a programme of development. And I've shown you some examples here. We've had now over 4 million for Royal Canal towpath development. And the canals are a particular opportunity in that they're in public ownership. So you have long linear corridors for walking and cycling and boating running from the centre of Dublin right across through the Midlands. We've looked to form partnerships where we can draw down funding, for example with Fáilte Ireland, and at the minute we've 3 key projects that they're 75% funding, and those are looking at a master plan for the development of the Shannon, looking at creating a greenway in the city using the canal towpaths, and also developing a tourism master plan for the development of Grand Canal Dock. And again, I've given you some examples here. Last year we had support through the Rural Recreation Scheme. We were able to attract $500,000 to develop a floating boardwalk that connects the Blue Way and the villages of Leitrim and Drumshanbo, and over 10,000 people a month are using this for walking. Our goal, very simply, is to increase use. And our target is to increase use of the inland waterways by 5% annually. And we want to do that in 2 ways. We want to increase use by local people. And we're doing that through programmes like Paddles Up, Blue Way 10K or open water swimming. We're moving away from sponsoring a once-off event to these are 6 or 12-week programmes engaging local communities in learning a new water sport. And we're hoping to create a generational shift so that in time every town and village beside a waterway will have an open water swimming club, a rowing club, a canoeing club, and people will be more regularly using the recreational assets on their doorstep. But the other half of increasing use is using the waterways to bring visitors into an area to create jobs and deliver prosperity. And there's different ways we're doing that. We're looking at how people are changing the way they use their recreational time. There's a desire for activity tourism, and we've looked at developing things like Blue Ways, presenting our waterways to a new audience, not just to boaters, but to people who want to get out and get active. We've looked at sports tourism, where we can bring in international events. We're developing a heritage trail and really using our existing facilities and presenting them to a new audience. So looking at all our attractive harbour sites along the Shannon and how we could map those and lay them out for people who come to Ireland in motorhomes. And we're also looking at the redevelopment of key sites. And on the next page, you have a picture of Tullamore Harbour. 2 major harbours, or a harbour and a branch line, right in the centre of Tullamore. Real potential to create a water quarter in Tullamore, and we've bid into the Rural Regeneration Fund with Offaly County Council, looking to develop this as a focal point within the town. We want to anchor back office, high-end IT jobs linked to Grand Canal Dock, but also create housing and a social and recreational amenity and a new destination within Tullamore. Our key priority at the minute is to get the towpaths along the canals complete. We will open the Royal Canal next year, 140 kilometres of it, and thereafter we will have an application go into the Greenway strategy this autumn for the Grand Canal, working with all of the councils across the length of it, again another 140 kilometres, and the Barrow Blue Way is in planning and has gone to appeal. I suppose, what are Blue Ways? I've mentioned them a couple of times. For us, a Blue Way was about repositioning the waterways to make them attractive to a new range of people. People who wanted to walk, to cycle, to canoe, stand-up paddleboard. And it was, instead of just providing a physical facility and hoping people would come, it was actually engaging with local communities, engaging with the local authority, engaging with private sector to anchor people. We provide the maps, we provide the infrastructure, but it's putting a package in the shop window that people can buy. and that has been highly successful. We've launched the first one, the Shannon Blueway was the pilot in 2014. Currently it's contributing 4 million per annum to the rural area around the Lough Annan Canal. We launched the Shannon Earn Blueway in 2015, and this year we launched the Lough Derg Blueway. Again, it's about linking together businesses and paths and opportunities and mapping them and making them accessible. I suppose the next question is there a demand for outdoor recreation? And the answer is yes. Activity tourism is big business. This is a slide, it's a piece of research we commissioned with Falch Ireland. They led on it, and it looked at the key markets for Ireland in terms of activity tourism. And of all the people surveyed who expressed a strong interest in coming to Ireland and who take activity tourism holidays, if we only got 5% of those who are strongly interested, it would be an extra $1 billion in tourism revenue. So there is real potential in this area. One of the projects we're working at the minute to try and unlock some of the latent untapped potential is developing an inland waterways spiritual trail. The inland waterways were once a highway for pilgrims, and there are sites dotted along them. We're working with the 13 local action groups led by ourselves, Falch Ireland, the Built Heritage section of my own sponsored Department of Arts, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, through the leader action groups, and we've drawn down money as a coordination project, and the feasibility study to develop that has started. Another area we're interested in is the Ulster Canal, often called the missing link in terms of creating a unified navigation from the top of Ireland to the bottom. It's 76 kilometres in length, and I've shown you in the map where it runs. And the Ulster Canal would connect the Earn system through to Lough Neagh, which would then link into the Lagan. We have opened 3.3 kilometres, just completed in September of this year, which provides a new navigation from Lough Erne to Castle Saunderson. And we chose Castle Saunderson as there is an international scout village there, and Cavan County Council owns 70 acres of land, and we hope to see that developed as an activity hub like Lough Key in Boyle, or outside Boyle if any of you are familiar with it, because you have to have a destination at the end of a navigation so people have a reason to go there. We also took to the NSMC in 2015 the idea that the way to develop the Ulster Canal was to champion the development of a greenway along the route. That would protect the route for future generations if there came a time when the canal could be redeveloped, but it provides an immediate economic benefit and will eventually give the link that will provide an off-road walking and cycling network that would run Dublin to Belfast. I'm conscious I'm skipping through this. We managed to draw down almost 5 million of Interreg funding through the Sustainable Transport Fund, and we have 22 kilometres of that Ulster Canal towpath development underway. Monaghan County Council had already led the way with a 3-kilometre route through the middle of Monaghan, and this builds on that by developing from Smithborough through to Middletown. And you can see in the pictures where we're hoping to go from and to. Another important project for us is realising 2 of our greatest assets, which are Grand Canal Dock and Spencer Dock in Dublin. And the intention here is to create a water quarter, a blue playground for the city and a new destination within the city. It's going to be a fast-track development zone for Dublin Tourism Coordination Committee. And below you can see some of the things we're doing to try and animate that strategy. We have a Dublin City Canal events programme, drawing together disparate events and branding them into a programme for visitors to come and use. We have started an open triathlon training session in Spencer Dock. We are hoping to have a new exit and boardwalk from the Grand Canal Dart Station. It doesn't open into Grand Canal Dock at the minute, and that's a game changer because we're one stop from Trinity. So that's 80,000 visitors can get from Trinity into Grand Canal Dock immediately if you open up that stop directly into the dock. We have developed, and the Falch Ireland study will flesh out the bones of it, an inner city greenway using the canal towpaths, which is 40 kilometres in length. And we're currently working with Dublin City Council and Irish Water on a water quality issue in Grand Canal Dock. There is a stormwater outflow that creates intermittent pollution, and otherwise the quality of the dock water is excellent because the water from the canal comes from Pollardstown Fen and it's bathing quality water. So you potentially have a dock that people can use for open water events, immersive events. We do need to modernise the canal bylaws. It's over 30 years from they were last modernised. In terms of the challenges, there are almost now 14,500 registered boats. Most of those boats are on the Shannon, 8,500 on the Shannon, 6 on the Erne. There are only 508 boats on the canal network. And I suppose in Ireland, you're spoilt with an embarrassment of riches. You have 2 open water lake systems, which are much more attractive to boating than using the canal system. And we need to develop the canals. We need to develop how we look after them to make them attractive and grow boating. And part of that is we have to develop the canal bylaws, because they have inherited, of the 508 boats that are on them, on the 360 kilometres, 75% of those never move. Part of our canal bylaw proposals, which we'll be bringing forward now, the Heritage Bill passed in the summer, and some of you will be familiar with that. But what we want to do is modernise the charging. We provide the public infrastructure on all of our navigations for mooring, for navigation signs, but on the canal network we own the whole thing. On our other waterways there is private sector investment, and when you're not cruising and using your boat recreationally, you buy a private mooring and you stay on that. In the canals we own everything, so everybody's always on our property. And the charging at €126 to use the canals for a year, and €152 is the maximum current charge to park your boat in a location for a year regardless of size, is too cheap to stimulate any inward investment. So we do want to modernise the charging for the canals, not least because if you go to the next page, one of the difficulties we have is that with the current charging, it's cheaper just to abandon your boat. And the only sanction we have at the minute is to remove it. And by the nature of boating, people buy them and then things happen, or there's family circumstances change and boats get abandoned, and it costs us an awful lot of money to remove them. So in the canal bylaws, one of our proposals is to introduce a fixed penalty notice, which was granted in the 2005 Maritime Safety Act, but needs a bylaw to bring it into use. And I can assure you that we're not going to become like car park attendants, but it is to give another measure for people who persistently, over months and indeed years, will not comply with the navigation inspector's request to move their boats or not be pollutant. It does give us another way of hopefully encouraging people to become more active boat owners. The other area in the bylaws we'll be looking at is making provision to manage new use. 30 years ago, no one anticipated there would be the demand for houseboats that there is today, and the new bylaws will allow us both to manage and provide for those. I'm coming to the end now, and I just wanted to give you a feel for the value of the inland waterways in terms of what they contribute each year, and it comes to just under 400 million. Private boating directly contributes 88 million. The cruise hire sector, which has grown strongly over the last 3 years, 55 million. Angling, just on the waterways we manage, is 142 million. And access to recreational opportunities, which is the softer things, that's the canoeing and the stand-up paddleboarding, is another, I'll have to put my glasses on, sorry. Can nearly read, 50 million. Health benefits from the people who are using them actively, 30 million. Events, 8 million. And what the good status water quality is worth is valued at 16 million. Against that, what we cost, you can see in the table below the changing levels of funding. In 2010, our grant from government was 39 million. Today it's 27.68. We are funded 85% by the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, and in the north 15% by the Department of Infrastructure, and that represents the percentage of navigation in each jurisdiction, and both jurisdictions fund their own capital. The next slide illustrates the pressure on critical structure repairs. The top line, the budget required, is the amount of money. When we looked at the assets we manage, if we are only to repair those which are in unsafe and critical condition, we need on average over 6 million each year. And you can see the grant that we've had each year, and our department has been very good to us in the last 2 years, and they've managed to find extra money in year to bring us up to 5.5 million. But this year, they haven't been able to find that resource, and next year, the allocation falls well short of it, and there will be challenges with that in trying to manage just critical condition infrastructure. That's before we do plan preventative maintenance. The other pressure we have is pension costs. When Waterways Ireland was formed, 223 staff transferred and designated into the body. Those staff came in the second and third quarters of their working careers with pension accruals, and we pay all of the pension costs out of our current allocation, which has not increased. So that continues to diminish the money for frontline services. When we started, it was zero. In 2010, that cost was 700,000. Next year, it will be 3.3 million. That's directly taking away from what's available from frontline services. I'm sorry that was very rushed, but in summary, we manage 1,000 kilometres of navigation. We are doing our level best to lever as much opportunity out of that for everybody on the island of Ireland, while also protecting it and looking after it. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I'll now invite Sharon in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the introductions and welcome. We are delighted to be here to present before the committee today. We have sent you a number of documents in advance, including our annual activity reports for the last 2 years. So I'm just going to give you a brief, partly a brief history lesson so that you can understand where the agency has come from, and then we'll move on to Brexit and other issues that we may have. So if you bear with me in the history lesson. As you are all aware, we're one of the 6 implementation bodies established under the Good Friday Agreement, and we claim to be the original cross-border body. The agency inherited the functions and responsibilities of the Foyle Fisheries Commission with regard to the conservation, protection, management and improvement of the fisheries of the cross-border foyle area. Further functions were then conferred on the agency by the Good Friday Agreement, and in 2007 the Foyle and Carlingford Northern Ireland Order and the corresponding Foyle and Carlingford Act provided for Lochs Agency to become the licensing authority for land and marine aquaculture in both Foyle and Carlingford area. We have responsibility for 4,070 square kilometres of catchment in the Foyle area and 480 square kilometres in Carlingford, with responsibility for the 2 sea lochs and an area extending 12 miles out to sea from Loch Foyle, which stretches to Downhill in Northern Ireland and Malin Head in County Donegal. The agency has been delivering transboundary fisheries management in these waters since the establishment of its predecessor in 1952, the Foyle Fisheries Commission. We are a small but very relevant organisation. We have an approved staffing complement of 53. We provide a unique statutory public function across an international border with an annual baseline budget of just 4 million. So our achievements over the last 20 years, and indeed since 1952, has allowed the agency to grow and develop its approach to fisheries management, deploying an internationally recognised evidence-based management approach and audit point management system for Atlantic salmon to enable management decisions. The agency has successfully developed and implemented a freshwater fisheries monitoring programme and a fish counters programme, both of which are critical when developing and delivering fisheries-orientated management. However, salmon numbers have declined globally, and unfortunately the foil system is experiencing similar downturns. With the decline, the agency has played a significant role in various research programmes, investigating the underlying reasons why the drop in numbers of returning Atlantic salmon is happening. We have also initiated research programmes which have highlighted potential issues with survival in the very early marine transitional phase. As the agency does not have the resources to fully address the questions raised, we sought and secured EU Interreg 5 funding, which included €1.4 million for the River Finn through Donegal County Council-led catchment care programme. We have secured €4.7 million for a project called Sea Monitor, which will allow us to further investigate the survival of salmon and distribution of other mobile marine species such as basking shark on the north coast between the island of Ireland and Scotland. The partnership consists of 9 partners from Ireland, the UK, Canada and the US, with the agency as lead. Our protection, conservation and enforcement work forms the central day-to-day operations of our business. Lochs Agency has instigated a significant number of prosecution cases over the years, taking actions in courts in both jurisdictions. These prosecutions encompass a variety of different offences. This unique aspect of our legislation provides the agency with a very distinctive and irreplaceable mechanism for ensuring the fisheries law is effectively enforced in cross-border areas, allowing the agency to prosecute by domicile. That is, where an offender can be prosecuted in the country where they reside as opposed to where the offence has actually taken place. Since September 2008, Lochs Agency has licensed and regulated the native oyster fishery in Lough Foyle. As previously mentioned, the 2007 Foyle and Carlingford Order and corresponding Act provide for the agency to become the licensing authority for both land and marine aquaculture in the Foyle and Carlingford areas. However, due to the ongoing stalemate over the jurisdictional issue, the regulations have not been enacted. There are high-level discussions currently taking place between the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office which relate to the jurisdictional issue before legislation can be brought to regulate this activity. We, unfortunately, are not involved in these discussions, but we hope that it will lead to the issue of unlicensed oyster farms being addressed. Our marine tourism and angling development remit has been supported over the years with investment through Interreg and core funding by both sponsored departments, which has led to improved access to many water-based activities and for anglers. In particular, the agency secured $3.7 million of Interreg funding aimed at developing and promoting marine tourism and angling. One of the marine tourism projects included the procurement and installation of pontoons in Derry City Centre, which now enables the Foyle Maritime Festival to hold the Clipper around the World Yacht Race. The high-quality angling product within the Foyle and Carlingford area make it a destination of choice for both local and overseas anglers. Average annual licence sales are currently around 9,000, with 5% of sales originating from around 18 countries across the world. Our catchments have been the venue of choice for many international angling events, generating much-needed economic investment in rural areas, including the very successful 2018 Commonwealth Fly Fishing Championships held in association with the Trout Angling Federation of Ireland. Through our education and outreach programmes, we pride ourselves in inspiring the next generation of catchment custodians. Our Riverwatch Visitor Centre has welcomed nearly 250,000 visitors since it opened in 2002. We have delivered numbers of workshops to schools that demonstrate the scientific functions of the agency. Our engagement programmes have seen the development and delivery of the Foyle Ambassador programme, with a Carlingford programme due to commence next year. To date, over 100 young people have completed this programme. On the impacts of Brexit, firstly, it was important that we gave you that brief overview and recap of our history, role and work, so that perhaps the committee can have a clearer picture of the impact and opportunity of Brexit, which we could avail of in the agency. Although at this minute in time there are too many unknowns, but we are not naive, there will be new challenges for the agency, without a doubt. Our uniqueness exists primarily because fish, poachers and pollution don't recognise borders. It is imperative that the agency continues to protect, conserve and develop the natural resource in the border counties. At this point, we are confident that nothing will change in terms of our legislative framework post-Brexit. Although that said, the UK's withdrawal from the EU is potentially one of the biggest threats to the environment in the medium to long term. However, the UK has committed to transpose EU directives into national legislation through the Great Repeal Bill, but we are unsure how this will work. We are concerned that as time passes and amendments are made to EU and UK legislation, that divergence will be inevitable, with standards and assessment techniques deviating, potentially leading to differing interpretations. We have developed and maintained strong working relationships with a number of relevant agencies in both jurisdictions in relation to law enforcement and the broader management of the Foyle and Carlingford catchment area. And it is our intention to continue post-Brexit to maintain and further develop such working relationships. There is no doubt that EU funding has played a substantial role supporting the work of the agency over the years. The agency has successfully secured over in excess of €20 million to date from various funding initiatives. In conclusion, the agency's unique strength is the fact that it has been working on a cross-border basis since 1952, pre-EU, through the Troubles. The Foyle Fisheries Acts of 1952 predate the accession of either Ireland or the UK to the European Union. We are confident that this so-called experiment in cooperation and goodwill referred to in the 1952 Acts will continue post-Brexit. Provision of what the agency termed the management agreement will strengthen the position of the agency post-Brexit and allow us to deliver management and regulation of aquaculture in the Foyle and Carlingford areas. This agreement must continue to be recognised by the relevant departments north and south and east and west as a priority post-Brexit. Finally, the role of the agency is irreplaceable. We are a very relevant 21st century organisation. Our work forms a template for the effective management, protection, conservation, development and promotion of a vulnerable natural environment which straddles both sides of an international border, sponsored and supported by 2 governments. The potential for the agency as a vehicle to deliver cross-border funding initiatives, environmentally themed projects and indeed many other projects will bring benefit to the cross-border region, should not be ignored, nor should it be underestimated. As I said, we have forwarded you a number of documents and I hope you have had time to look through them. And if you have any questions, my colleagues and our Vice Chair of our board are happy to take any questions the committee has.
Okay, thanks very much, Sharon and Don. You'll probably notice people leaving and coming back. You know, it's just the nature of the House. There's a judicial appointments bill going on in the Shannon, so some of the senators have had to move and others are doing other work in the House. You'll probably see them on the screen. Anyway, I'm going to open up to questions. So Frank Feehan is the first. Anyone else? And Declan Breathnach.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Dawn, it's great to see you here. I have a huge interest in Waterways Ireland coming from Boyle in County Roscommon, and indeed my father had a boat on the Shannon navigation, and whilst we enjoyed it now and then, when he passed away 15 years ago, myself and my brother had a row over who wouldn't get the boat, and thankfully I won and he got it, and his wife never forgave me.
No.
So we didn't have the same. I was also chairperson Lockheed Forest Park Action Group before we got involved, and it's wonderful to see all the various agencies such as local authority, Quelcha and yourselves all working together to make that one of the major tourist attractions, and I think more can be done, but it's wonderful to see. Just, you know, the largest 6 north-south implementation bodies, sometimes we take it for granted. It's hugely significant to me in Agreed Ireland that we're working together, and I've heard nothing but good news from you. And the last few years, like your diversification effectively is very, very welcome. And I've seen the Blue Way in Acres Lake, the boardwalk, and I've walked it with our child, and it's absolutely wonderful. And we don't realise that in Ireland that we have weather all year round. We can actually, if we put on the right rain gear, it's the same, what the temperate weather effectively. So more of these is very, very welcome. Just regarding the Ruski Lock, again, I want to say it's great to see the work there. One aspect, and it was an issue from, we had the flooding, the serious flooding of 2010, and I don't think all the agencies came together, and it's great to see yourselves coming together with the local authority and DSB in monitoring these, because it's a huge issue around Carrick and Shannon, around Ruski and around those areas, and I know you monitor the depths of the lakes as well, and Loch Allen. But I just feel that Jamestown Lock, I think funding is got for the Jamestown Lock, but that was very, very vital, because there was a local group that got involved there with expertise, and were listened to by the OPW and by yourselves, and I think that a lot of those pinch points have worked. So you're not responsible for flooding, but you're certainly part of the solution, and I'd like to thank you for your work there. Look, the heritage trails, the tourism, the motorhome facilities and the Blue Ways are all a sign that you are diversifying, and it's very, very welcome. And I've seen, first of all, the huge local benefit from effectively the Blue Way, which we never thought that would be such a benefit, but I see the local benefits that's there. And just finally, just the charge, I'm just a bit confused. It's €126 to use for a year. That's just... It's just on the canals.
Yes.
And
the other waterways are free.
What was that? So you're hoping to raise where people park their boat, is that right?
Yeah. On the Shannon, for example, where the public facilities that we provide and the maximum you can stay is 5 days, those are free of charge. But people, when they're not using their boat, then buy a berth in a private marina where they leave it long term. On the canals, we own all of the property, and the maximum charge to use the canals for a year is €126, and the maximum charge to park your boat and leave it somewhere for a year of any size is 156, 52. And and those charges are too low. And the private marinas and our other waterways, people are paying, I suppose, at the bottom of the scale, €600, anything up to €1,600 for their private berth. So I want to raise charging on the canals. We want to have an affordable choice. We want to have a range of charges depending on the facilities. But it's holding back the development of the canals because there's no private inward investment like we enjoy in the other waterways, where there's private marinas providing security and water and electric where people can leave their boats. And that will improve the quality of boats as well. For it will, because if you have a very good boat, you want somewhere with good facilities you can leave it that's secure.
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. And Sharon, don't take this. I think I leave the locks to some of the people, the politicians who live near the locks. So thank you.
Declan.
Thanks, Chair. Senator Feehan has been always at sea. Firstly, thank you for your presentation. Declan Breathnach from County Louth. We don't have much impact in relation to canals, unfortunately, but we do have the Newry Canal, and obviously the whole plans with the Greenway development between obviously Down Council and Louth County Council, and the potential of the linkages there, particularly looking at the map. I'd like you, Dawn, maybe to comment on, I mean, the Ulster Canal, which I know my colleague here on my left will be more interested in and obviously debate, but the opportunity to actually link from, if you like, the vicinity of Portadown, where the Newry Canal and the walkways are intended to go that far, and looking at the map of the Ulster Canal, it doesn't seem to be too far away. Are there plans to link there? And that's I suppose the main point I have. But just to compliment you in relation to the presentation, it's one of the better ones that I've seen coming in here, and gives a very strong overview of Waterway Ireland. And in relation to the locks, it'd be very remiss of me and the Locks Agency if I didn't refer to my good colleague Peter Savage and Louth County Council and his commitment to your organisation. But there are just three issues that would obviously, and I know you've referred to one of them, obviously the context of Brexit. To elaborate a little bit further, I know, as you said, you have been long in existence in terms of cross-border projects and will continue to be, but the issue, for example, of the water rates and the concerns around the fishing rates, particularly both in Derry and indeed in Carlingford Lough, to comment on, and I suppose more recently the impact that you might have in terms of the development of Warren Point Port and the concerns in relation to the dredging there, and if you're at liberty to comment on that, Sharon, in terms of the overall view, because there are certainly some causes for concern in relation to the shell fishing and oyster fishing in the loch. I did attend their briefing in Warren Point Town Hall a number of weeks ago, where they outlined their intentions, but allaying of fears of people in relation to what may happen in relation to particularly the dredging and the disposal relative to the loch. I'd be interested if you have a comment on that. And lastly but not least, very taken by the whole issue of the Sea Monitor project, and wish you well with it.
Okay, maybe I'll just a number of questions, broad range, you might come in on.
I'll just take the issue of the Newry Canal and Portadown and connecting back in. One of the things that has been done as part of the work around creating a greenway along the Ulster Canal is ourselves, with our local authority partners, have undertaken a strategic study and looked at all of the connections, and also undertaken the environmental studies that are required if they're to be developed. And what we're trying to do is put in place, if you like, the background work, so as funding opportunities become available, that roadmap is there. And a lot of the work is done in terms of being able to capitalise then on funding opportunities, and that would tie into that, what is already a very successful routeway.
I omitted to, in relation, rather than, I mean, you go back in, Don, the issue of how the canals compare relative to people using permanent residency on them compared to, say, the canals in England. Are there many people who are there on a permanent, who are using the homes as part of their livelihood, as opposed to coming on holidays and whatever? And is there potential there for people to actually own homes relative to what happens in England?
Yeah, there's a huge demand for people who want to live on boats. Particularly in urban areas here in Grand Canal Dock and in villages like Sallins, Hazelhatch, anywhere close to the city where you've got good connections. We have planning permission in Grand Canal Dock for 20 to be used as residential moorings, and we have some approval in Shannon Harbour at the far end of the system. One of the things we'd hope to do by bringing in the bylaws and creating a platform from charging is to make investment in those type of facilities economically viable. It's not something, they are definitely a part of a vibrant canal network, and you can have communities that flourish, but I think it would be, it does need to be managed and controlled, because if you don't manage and you don't control, then you have all sorts of problems with pollution and people living in substandard conditions. And so it's something that we are keen to manage and grow, but in a sustainable way and in a way that also meets with the planning authority's requirements.
I'll take the question, the first part of the question on regard to Warren Point Harbour and the dredging proposal. If I could just comment on that. So the Locks Agency, we are aware that there is a planning application has been submitted. The port are planning to dump dredged material in the lock, where currently the material is placed 6 miles out to sea. So we are part of that consultation programme, or consultation process. As far as that's as far as we've been involved at the minute. We are being there at the table with discussions. Our people on the ground locally have been in discussions with the harbour, but at this point in time, that's all we are prepared to comment on. Now, I'll pass over to our Director of Aquaculture in a minute, who can maybe talk about the effects that may have on the shellfish and aquaculture industry in Carlingford Loch. In regard to the issue, the disputed waters is what you were referring to in Carlingford and Foyle. Again, that is out of our control, but it's very much something that we would like moved forward in regards to the management agreement, because we really do want to work with the oyster farmers, particularly in Lough Foyle, where there is a number of unregulated oyster trestles at the moment, probably in the region of 50,000. But we want to work with them. We want to regulate that activity. The Act is there, it just needs to be enacted and to allow us to go in and regulate that activity. And the farmers actually in the area do want to work with the agency. And again, our Director of Aquaculture, Barry Fox, can talk further on that issue. In regard to Sea Monitor, yes indeed, we are very proud of the achievements that our staff have got in securing that funding. Dr. Patrick Boylan has been instrumental in securing that funding for us, so it's going to be a very worthwhile project. We are currently recruiting staff, well-paid jobs, which will be based in the Derry area, which is quite welcome as well to the economy in the Derry area. So firstly, I'd like to, Barry, perhaps you could answer the question on the Warren Point Harbour.
Yeah, I suppose just maybe to elaborate, I can't really say a whole pile at this stage, but the issue of the dredge disposal site in Carlingford, this is, if I'm right, the third attempt to establish the internal dredge spoil site. So basically there's an argument being put forward that it's an individual cell. So what they're saying is that the sand has never came from any other area and never left the sea lock. And that is yet to be, I suppose, proven by the consultants. But it is so early in the consultation process that no decisions have been made, nor have any of the environmental agencies that are involved in making those decisions given any indication whether it will be approved or not. So really on that area, on that issue, that's probably as much as we can comment on at this stage, but we are involved in every step of the process with regards to the application. I suppose with regard to aquaculture, Sharon has alluded to, obviously as you're aware yourself, Carlingford is a very important aquaculture sea lock. It produces a huge amount of flat oysters and gigas oysters to the Irish and French, Belgian countries as regards product, and also the mussel industry in Carlingford is seen as one of the best production areas in the country. The impact from an internal dredge disposal site, I suppose, is something that, again, we can't clearly comment on whether it's going to have a significant impact or not. There are studies being undertaken, and there are opinions out there as regards whether it will and it won't. Again, until the consultation moves a bit further forward, I think we can't really give a clear indication on the impacts that they will have. I suppose as regards the production and the foil, again, very important that we get our management agreement forward and that we can actually implement our licensing regime and our legislation to regularise that activity. It's generating a huge amount of money to the local economies there, but unfortunately currently it's an unregulated activity.
Open up some more members. Brendan?
Sherlock, and I welcome the representatives of the two implementation bodies. Just with regard to Waterways Ireland, Don, initially you paint a picture of a very declining resources and competing demands and infrastructure. It's getting older, it needs investment, and thankfully there has been a huge increase in usage and traffic on the waterways, if you want to put it that way, and you don't have a good revenue stream. Obviously you're depending on public funding through the different departments. Is there any recognition at department level of the huge importance of this asset and Waterways Ireland to the overall tourism industry? If you're attracting additional visitors, you need to be able to maintain the infrastructure that's attracting those people. The fact that you've outlined the decline in the allocation from the departments over the past 7 to 8 years in particular, I think there comes a time when you can stretch resources so far, but you need investment, critical investment too, when you reach certain stages in usage of facilities and that. I would sincerely hope that the case has been listened to at government level and at department level in regard to the need to invest and ensure that we keep renewing, regenerating and protecting that asset that is so important. I represent Cavan Monaghan. I was very well aware in working with the then Tánaiste John Wilson when the Erne Shannon waterway was restored. It was then known as a person from the general area as the Ballyconn-Ballinamore Canal. I remember in 1989 when that project was announced in the then government national development plan, the people who were negative about it stated that it would never happen, etc., etc. That was at a time in Ireland when we had very difficult position, north, south, east, west between Ireland and Britain. But thankfully, through political leadership and with the commitment of other organisations, that the Erne Shannon waterway, Ballyconn-Ballinamore Canal, was restored and opened in the early 1990s and has been hugely successful. And it's a great tribute to everybody who contributes to its management today and the people who gave the leadership at that time. And I remember very well some of the naysayers saying at the time that if that restoration engineering work went on, it would flood the countryside. The usual negativity. Well, it did the opposite. It helped from a drainage aspect in Cavan, Leitrim and in South for many of the areas that I'm most familiar with, and it's great to see the level of traffic. And then, as Senator Feehan referred to, the additional activities that have grown out of the use of the waterways, be it the Blue Ways or whatever. And my colleague Deputy Breathnach mentioned about the potential of the Ulster Canal, and I'm glad that that project is moving along incrementally, and that it was referred to in the, I think it was the St Andrews Agreement. I think it was Mr Trimble in particular at that time was a strong advocate for that project, and Bertie Herron agreed to it at that particular time, and it's good to see it moving on. Naturally, we would all like to see it progress quicker, but it's very positive that it's being progressed incrementally, which is satisfactory. You would have seen through, I'm sure, through parliamentary question or all debates that I've been advocating an extension of the Erne navigation from Belturbet to Killikeen to Killashandra, that powerful stretch of waterway as well, that great resource. I know that some studies have been undertaken that allude and refer to environmental concerns, etc. Now, recently, you have given a commitment that those studies can be revisited to see with the advancement in technology, engineering technology, etc. I would hope that it will be possible to revisit those studies and see if that additional stretch of waterway could become navigable. It would be a powerful additional complementary asset to the existing Erdon-Shannon waterway and the hope for Ulster Canal and all of that knits in to the other waterways in this country as well. But I think as a committee we would be very supportive of the need for investment in this infrastructure. When Deputy Breathnach referenced England, and when you go and see the waterways in England and the huge literally traffic jams on them with very little space and a huge amount of traffic on them. Like, our waterways are so underutilised to some extent, and surely, and you outlined very clearly there about activity holidays, the potential of those, surely it will be a great investment and a good return to the taxpayer for their investment in our waterways. And again, it's heartening to see the headquarters in Enniskillen in a border county as well, with your office in Carrick-on-Shannon as well, and one in Clare, I understand. Just with regard to the Locks agency, I hope that, Sharon, that you and your colleagues have consultation with your parent government departments on both sides of the border in regard to Brexit, how it might impact. And I'm conscious that that agency was there pre-EEC times or any other time and worked at a time when relations were difficult between Ireland and Britain. But I'd just like to know what soundings, what indications are you getting from government departments in relation to the likely impact of Brexit, and similarly with Waterways Ireland as well, the fact that we're to a large extent in a common regulatory area for many activities due to EU membership, if you're expecting adverse impacts from Brexit on both of your agencies. Thank you, Cahill.
Just to follow up on Brendan, you might think in terms of, and some of your answers maybe when you're summing up, what exactly you want, is it demands in relation to the committee itself. What do you want us to do? What would you like us to do? What can we do in relation to both your agencies? I'm just going to let Frances Black in first. She's under pressure in relation to Shannon business.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And to be honest, I'm so naive in this area, I wouldn't have had any clue. I think today was a great learning for me in the sense of the work that you do. You take it for granted, your waterways. I live on the canal, I walk the canal, most days. I've been on the Shannon, and I honestly, I feel bad even saying this, didn't realise the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes and the amount of work that you do. So I want to thank you for that. And I think, great. I mean, I think you talked about the blueways, which, I mean, a brilliant idea, activity holidays and people getting out on the water. I just was a bit confused. I have a couple of questions. I was just a bit confused, particularly on how people pay for that, if you know what I mean, and what way that all works. And would there be, huge issues around water safety and stuff like that? And also then, even when you're talking about the walkways, security, the safety and all of that kind of stuff, I just wanted to kind of maybe get you to open up a little bit more around that. And Deputy Smith asked about Brexit. I'd love, maybe Sharon, for you to expand a little bit more on how you feel Brexit, just expand more about how Brexit is going to impact you. And then also there was another question I wanted to ask on how you work together. I mean, you're saying, Sharon, it's an all-island initiative, and that's the way it's been since 1952, which is just brilliant. I'm sure there's what a model that maybe, we could go forward working with, in some capacity, but just how you work together and how that partnership is a positive. What way is it a positive for ye? And I think that was all I really wanted to ask. Was there something else? Yeah, I wanted to ask about Brexit. Yeah, that's it really. Yeah, thanks.
Maybe let's just come back in and I'll take Alicia then. Please.
Okay. If I maybe start. Just to say that we are re-looking at the environmental studies that were done for Killikeen and Killishandra, and I mean, I know the area, and for those of you who don't, it's akin to, you see pictures of wilderness lake areas in Canada and you think, oh my goodness, isn't that fantastic? And that's what we have in that area. I'm not going to dress this up. I believe there are significant environmental challenges. It is an SCA. It has the highest protection in Europe. To create navigation requires significantly raising the level. The preliminary studies we did showed that we would be unable to make the level of mitigation that would be required. But we are re-looking at those, for we are in earnest, to see is there a way of doing it. If it's not possible to create navigation, it is a superb area to create a blueway with those other activities, and it's unique in terms of its scope and extension, and we've met the council there and we've offered whatever assistance we can, and we will do the studies. In terms of, you asked me about the balance and the understanding in our sponsor departments, we are at a critical point in terms of funding, and it ties in with your question, which is about how do you pay for the things. And I suppose we're like the Roads Authority in that we're providing a piece of major infrastructure that lots of other stuff runs off and flourishes because it's there. If you take the villages along the waterways, they flourish because a public body sees that that is maintained and opened, and people can get on and off it and brings activity. But we are at a tipping point, and there are choices to be made. And I don't think that's a simple answer. I think, yes, both countries have limited amounts of money, and there's choices to be made about how it's invested. And I tried to outline some of the things we were doing, which is we are trying to create significant income sources for each waterway. For example, here in Dublin, through developing a valuable site we own in the Docklands. But also, ultimately, charging does come into it, and at the minute we only charge in the canals. If you look at the model across Europe, and indeed in America and Canada, people who have boats pay something towards that public infrastructure. And to put that into context, if the 8,000 boats in the Shannon were each to pay €100 a year, like a tax you pay for your car to use that navigation, that would increase by 67% the amount of money available to run the Shannon. So it's going to be a range of things, and I know charging is always difficult, but it's going to take a range of things to do it. And we are funded, and both departments are very supportive, and there are pressures in lots of ways. But if you compare us to Scottish Canals, they're funded by their government 18 million for 220 miles of navigation. We have 1,000 kilometres for your 24 million. So we're on the pin of our collar in terms of what we're trying to deliver. We are trying to look, if you keep expanding the towpaths, next year we'll open the Royal Canal. One of the things we did going into that, because we don't make an income off it, it's free. That's the joy of these at the minute, and it will always be free to walk. But we've entered partnerships, formal agreements with the councils, where annually we will meet and they will invest in the ongoing maintenance along with us, because we recognise that if we're creating things of this scale, when you take the Achill Greenway, it's 42 kilometres. The Royal Canal on its own will be 140. They are of international significance, and they will require money to invest them. And we've gone forward in partnership, and we'll maintain them in partnership, trying to spread that base. The issue of security and safety varies depending on location, and the one thing I can say is that as we have developed and improved facilities and towpaths and more people are using them, they become safer, because people then own them and they're on them more often, and where we can provide lighting in urban areas. But there are, if you create a long corridor that you can't get on off easily, people don't have the same feelings of security, and we have to be mindful of that going forward, while also protecting what's special about them, the fact that you are in this green space in a city. So it is a challenge for us, and it is something we're mindful of.
Sure, could I just ask one quick supplementary? Don, am I correct in thinking that we cannot have a Waterways Ireland Blueway along a river that is not within your navigation system?
I can't run it.
Yeah.
It's outside my statutory jurisdiction.
Yeah.
The waterways that we have were set in the legislation. They were added to with the requirement for the Ulster Canal. We added to them in 2015 by taking on the role as leading development of a greenway along the Ulster Canal, but it would have to be designated for us to do it. But there's nothing to stop us, and we have done this, stepping outside that and providing practical support to our local authority colleagues.
That leadership would be needed for Blueways, where you don't have your own remit, I think.
So this area is outside my
Yes.
jurisdiction at the moment.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. The questions sort of overlap from both the Senator and the Deputy, so I'm just going to generalise in my answer in regards to Brexit. And the Chair, you asked what issues the committee could raise for us. So for us, as the Senator pointed out, we've been operating since 1952. So for us, cross-border working has been, it's our day-to-day, it's what we do. Sometimes when people say to us, how is Brexit going to affect you? We actually have to sit down and question ourselves seriously, because it's what we do, it's what we've taken for granted. We have a map of our jurisdictional area. We don't actually see the border between the north and south. We work to our jurisdictional area, which goes right into Donegal. And if you looked at a map of our area, it's practically half of Northern Ireland, just down to the tip of Lough Erne. We just stop short of Lough Erne. We go right up to the Ponderosa, which is on the Glenshane Mountain, and right into Donegal, round to Malin Head. So we've been doing that for, as I said, since 1952, funded 50-50 by both governments. So we have established relationships and partnerships that we need for survival. That's what we do. But those relationships are so strong now because we have been doing it for a number of years. We work with our sponsors and our fellow academics in Ireland, the IFI, Inland Fisheries Ireland. We work quite closely with them in regard to scientific information. The Marine Institute. We have now established a relationship with Cork University. We have academic relationships with Glasgow and Queen's universities. So we continue, those will continue post-Brexit without a doubt. We have staff in both jurisdictions which we pay. We operate 2 tax regimes. We operate legislation in regards to employment laws in both jurisdictions. So this is bread and butter for us. This is what we do day in and day out. So we don't see Brexit affecting that. Our fisheries management regimes have been running since 1952, and we now have a considerable knowledge base within the agency and expertise, which we see as a template going forward. Maybe to even, we would hope, expand our jurisdictional remit to other border areas where maybe it may be difficult to deliver fisheries management because of the impact of Brexit. But we continue to work on our relationships, and for us, we are only as strong as our relationships north and south, and that is our sponsor departments. We have a board which is made up of 6 northern appointees and 6 southern appointees, and they all work very well. And again, it's for the good of protecting a valuable natural resource. So in regards to what the committee can do for us, we would ask you to look at the management agreement. It is a very sensitive subject in regards to the jurisdictional issue, but for us that would further strengthen our position post-Brexit. And as I've said, the oyster farmers in Lough Foyle are actually wanting us to work with them to regulate that activity. So it would be a very worthwhile opportunity for the committee to maybe take that forward for us. In regards to environmental regulations, we do have concerns, and as I said, we're not that naive. How they will diverge in the future, we're not sure. But again, through our scientists and our scientific department, we have forged strong relationships with other like-minded organisations in Ireland and the UK, and we intend to keep those relationships and press forward with best practice in regards to that. In regard to funding, we have been very successful. We have initiated tourism projects and implemented them in Malin Head. We secured the funding for quite substantial works in Malin Head, Benoan Beach in County Derry. We have done quite a lot of tourism projects, and we are actually working with Louth County Council on the Louth Greenway, Carlingford Greenway. So we are involved in a lot of other funding streams. We have Heritage Lottery funding. We've been successful in the past with Cooperation Ireland. The International Fund for Ireland has sponsored a lot of our activities. So we're actually looking now, we've been approached by the Princess Trust, who are looking to work with us, believe it or not, on a cross-border capacity as well. So we see ourselves as a template for a lot of things post-Brexit in regards to the environment and funding and tourism, especially the marine tourism activities that are on the rise in Lough Foyle in regard to canoeing and some of the activities that Dawn had mentioned, which are on the rise in Waterways Ireland as well. So unless would any of my colleagues like to add to that, perhaps the Vice Chair would have something to add to us.
Yeah, no, I think, thanks, Chair. I suppose the fact that the Lochs Agency has been in existence prior to the EU formation would give great hope that we can navigate any issues that might arise. In fact, it may well be a vehicle for other bodies that are undergoing transition to maybe take a look at how the Lochs Agency has evolved over the last 60 years. That's not to say that there won't be challenges, and I think that environmentally the transposition of the EU legislation into the UK legislation will probably be one of the most difficult aspects to keep it from diverging on a completely different path. But I think funding, we still have we're co-funded obviously by 2 jurisdictions. We will still have 1 member within the EU, and I think that's very significant. I'm not overly worried. That's not to say we're not going in with our eyes wide open, but because there's so many unknown unknowns, we're like everybody else. We have to wait and see. But I think we're probably better placed and better prepared to handle Brexit than most of the other bodies that have been in existence since the Good Friday Agreement.
Anyone else? Alicia?
Thank you, Chair. Most of what I was going to ask has already been answered, but there's a few questions I still have. Firstly, welcome to the deputation here today, and thanks for coming and giving evidence as part of this committee. A particular welcome to the North West contingent, and we could have possibly saved you a trip. We're hoping to go up to Derry as a committee in the very near future, but you're very welcome down to Dublin all the same. Just in relation to the comments that have been made in relation to Brexit, whilst I'm encouraged by your positivity in relation to where you think things may or may not go, I have to say that from my point of view, I think you are right to be concerned in terms of the repealing of legislation in the way that is being suggested by the British government at the minute. We don't know what that's going to mean for anyone, but I'm wondering, has there been conversations with specific conversations around the needs of, for example, the Lochs Agency in terms of the legislative change that could potentially happen post-Brexit, notwithstanding the fact that we don't know how any of this is going to look at this stage, but I would like to think that there has been conversations with the British government in particular in relation to that repeal legislation. Just in relation to the jurisdictional issue, I hear the call in relation to needing help or assistance from the committee. Obviously, we have influence in all jurisdictions within this room, so I'm just wondering what the current status actually is. It is something that needs done. We've been listening to it for a while, but I'm wondering what the blockage is, if there is such a thing, or is it just process that's taken too long, and what we can collectively or indeed individually do, be it here in Dublin, in London, or indeed in the north. So if you can give us just a brief synopsis of where that particular issue is. In relation to the Lochs Agency, and I know you've already been commended by he's gone now, by Frank, in relation to some of the good work that you have undertaken. I just want to put it on record from my point of view, the huge amount of work that has been undertaken by the Lochs Agency and indeed all of the key stakeholders in the North West region to bring together, sort of reclaiming the foil almost. There's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done in relation to that, and I know the Lochs Agency are involved in all of the conversations between the stakeholders in order to maximise the potential of the foil. But even if you take into context, the use of the foil 8 years ago to now, it's a dramatic difference, and a huge congratulations to yourselves and again all of the stakeholders in bringing forward what is now one of our most successful festivals through the Maritime Festival. So, as I say, I just wanted to put that on record, my appreciation in relation to that. I'm wondering, just in relation to the canals and the issue of charging, is there a model that is universal, say across the islands, or do different areas look at things differently? I actually find it. I was quite shocked to hear that there isn't currently charging for such a thing, and I'm wondering, is it something that is done, for example, in Scotland and England and Wales or elsewhere? And if there is models, what is the best model? But I would be particularly concerned about, whilst again hoping that I'm wrong in this and that your positivity is correct, but I just can't see how the Locks Agency will be protected in the short term. I know you said that you do have concerns in the medium to long term in relation to legislation, but I can't get my head around how even in the short term, even though there has been relationships going back to the 50s, and you're very right in what you're saying in relation to the fact that we all take for granted the work that the Locks Agency and all the cross-border agencies, and we've all been doing over the past number of years. But that said, we shouldn't just take it for granted. So I'm just wondering how that confidence has come about that in the short term that things will be okay.
Just maybe before you reply, you mentioned the fact that the quality of the water. Maybe you might expand on that. How clean is it? And you talked about pollution. What's the big problems you have in relation to? You talked about those houseboats. Again, what would be the best model for that? Invasive species. Everyone's always interested in what invasive species. Is there new ones coming on stream every year? One of the issues that anglers would have is the removal of pike from many of the locks. Would you have concerns in relation to that? And just one of the things that sort of struck me straight away was that someone that used the Lewis in Dublin, the removal of canal there at Fatima Mansions, and do you see that as on reflection, was it a major mistake? And again, to join up the canals and so on, there's a gap. Do you have those problems in relation to your work? So yeah, there's some of the questions that struck me. The ageing and historic estate, we can all understand that, but again, how crucial is that is maintained, and again, maybe that might be some of the area that you might want to come back to us in relation to support from the committee in relation to. Again, if you don't respond today in relation to what you want this committee to do, I'd appeal to you maybe to write to us, and we'll do that as part of this report. So, one moment. Who wants to kick off? Don again?
Okay. I didn't comment on Brexit, and if I had asked one thing, minimise any impact, because for tourism, particularly in the border counties, any impediment that makes it less attractive will have a real impact. The difference in the VAT rate, we have seen the hire cruise sector, commercial activity, it's mobile. We've seen cruiser operators on the air and acquire basis in the south and operate cross-jurisdictionally still, but taking advantage of the better VAT rate in the south. If we're faced with a situation where recreational boat owners have to pass through any form of impediment to that free movement, it will affect the whole border sweep of navigation, because they just don't bother. We have, and I couldn't overemphasise how important it is that that remains seamless if it's going to continue to flourish. Picking at some of the other issues, is there a charging model? Yes. Across Europe, across America and Canada, there is a charging regime. It is normal for particularly boats, because boats cannot operate without someone providing a navigation and maintaining all the marks and the dredging and the depths and the water monitoring and harbours. There is charging is normal. I think the challenge for us is to introduce that in a way that is inclusive. But I think it has to be part of the funding model, because there are pressures on public money. It's not infinite. In terms of invasive species, we certainly are very aware of new aquatic invasives that are coming at us. We are well aware of the Loch Corrib, where a whole system was lost and the amount of money it took to clean that up, and we see pressure points. The fact too that legislation has moved forward and there are less and less ways to deal with invasive weeds, and they grow everywhere at once, creates real challenge in terms of keeping navigations open, particularly the canals to a standard that is attractive for boating, and that requires additional investment. I don't know enough about pike, but we certainly, we do try to support and encourage. We work with the Lochs Agency, we work with Inland Fisheries to try and see that fishing flourishes and is an important part of the tourism mix, particularly in the shoulder seasons. We now have 4 weeks of international fishing competition in the cross-border area. It's contributing $750,000 a year, and that has gone from being primarily based on coarse fish by weight to now pike fishing. They're looking for the specimen pike, you're looking for something over a metre long, and people are coming from all over the world and are high spenders to do that. So we're in an evolving situation. This may not be the environmental approach, but for me it's about making sure whatever we have to offer and can sell internationally, we're doing it, and we're doing it well. And there is a need for better coordination, because if somebody lowers the lake level, which isn't in my bailiwick in some areas, we can leave all the pike spawn high and dry, and there's no small pike that year. But it's all working together better. So thank you.
Seán.
First of all, I would like to thank the Member of Parliament for her kind comments. Thank you, very much appreciated. And indeed, the Foyle Maritime Festival is a huge success in the Foyle, and it has gone from strength to strength over the years. The agency does play a big role in that festival. We provide what we see as the marine tourism end of that festival. So we provide all the activities that were on the water that you would have seen this year: stand-up paddleboarding, canoeing. We ran various competitions. We sponsored the swimming competition, the Open Water Swimming Challenge. So we have been very active, and as I said, we secured the funding that now allows that clipper round the World Yacht Race to Moor and Derry for the period of the festival, which is absolutely amazing. You mentioned our legislative change, and we're not naive. We do know that we have challenges in the future, as we said, post-Brexit. But for us, what we are trying to get people to understand is the 1952 Act is unique. We are able to add to that legislation and change it as we require. We work with the Attorney General in the south, and we work with the Department of Solicitors in the north. So we amend our own legislation. We complete a regulatory review each year, which goes before both of those institutions, and they give us advice and guide us. So our legislation has been working for over 60 years. We don't see that changing in regard to that legislation, which allows us to carry out our day-to-day operations. Yes, the environmental EU directives, we do have concerns, but again, we've had conversations, we are looking at how we can be involved, and we would hope that our government departments, north and south, would see us as a vehicle to maybe implement whatever changes are required in the border regions, and see us, to use us and our expertise and our knowledge. Our legislation is quite unique, and I would encourage people maybe to have a quick look at what we can and can't do. The prosecuting by domicile is very unique, and that will still continue. It won't change. So for us, we are quite content that that will continue. And we've had the conversations with both sponsor departments. We are constantly asked to update reports on day one planning, what's going to happen on the 1st of April 2019. We have done that both north and south, and we continue to update that. But they will tell you that we are unique and that we have our own set of laws, which, as I said, we update annually.
Very lucky.
Yeah. Now, at the minute, we are in a bit of a stalemate because of the political situation in the north with regards to the Assembly. So that's our regulatory review would go through that process as well. The NSMC would approve our legislation. So at the minute, we have a number of items parked. We would like to bring in fixed penalties, for example, on-the-spot fines, but we can't do that until the political process moves forward in the North. But that legislation amendment is sitting there ready to go. In regard to invasive species, actually, we have a concern in regards to invasive species, obviously, with being a fisheries management body. And I would just ask Dr. Paddy Boylan maybe if he could comment, if the chair will allow, on the invasive species issue.
Yeah, I suppose there are a few key ones that we keep coming across. Giant hogweed is one. Probably quite a few issues on the Erie Canal and Clonrye. Again, we don't really have any legislative remit with regard to that. Then, I suppose in the foil, one of the ones that seems to have come up in the last few years is Asian clam. And we're involved in monitoring programmes with Parks and Wildlife and NIA with regard to that. Unfortunately, when these things are in, there's often not an awful lot you can do about them other than monitor and see what the likely impact is going to be. But I think...
Yeah, Chair, I have one more question to answer. You wanted a brief synopsis on the jurisdictional issue. We are not involved in that. We have our Act, and we are aware that discussions are taking place, but really we cannot do any. We can't progress that any further. It is down to a higher power than us.
Yeah, but are you aware of where the current status is? Is it that they've drew up? No. Okay.
The management agreement is ready to go. All we need is signatures, but it's not obviously as simple as that. There is discussions in the background, but for us it is as simple as that. And it would allow us to regulate the unregulated oysters in the foil. Now, I'm only in the agency 4 years, and the discussions have been going on since 2007. So they've been going on quite a while. But we did give evidence to the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee on Fisheries, and they had asked that the issue be looked at and progress within the next 6 months, and that the agency be given the resources to implement the management agreement. But I am aware that discussions are taking place with DERA and the DSO in the North, but that is all we've heard. We haven't been updated as to where it is, east-west, so to speak.
Really appreciate you coming in, and both of you, all of you, to answer our questions so comprehensively. I think it was very, very interesting, and I did, suggest that if you have issues that you want the committee to try and progress on your behalf, please write to us, and we'd certainly look at this again. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Our next meeting will be held on Thursday, the 22nd of November, and the meeting is now adjourned.